Hello, everyone, and welcome to Synthesis. Synthesis is a Root and River hosted webcast that features nonconformist leaders whose ideas make them and us see the world differently. And this is our second episode. We're really excited that you've joined us, and we're very thrilled for our guest, who is not just an amazing business leader, but also a dear friend of Root and River and each of us personally. So we are excited to have Rose Fass as our guest for the second episode. And to introduce you to her, she's the founder and CEO of Fassforward Consulting Group, which is a leading-edge business transformation firm. Rose works with Fortune 500 executive teams on translating strategy, driving change, and growing leadership. She has over 35 years of experience in technology and consumer-driven industries. During her career, Rose has opened new businesses in the United States, has been a general manager, and has led major corporate transformations as the Chief Transformation Officer at Xerox. In 2001, Rose founded Fassforward Consulting Group and has served as the CEO since then. She has been named as one of the top 10 women business leaders of New York, and her firm has been awarded the Inc. 500 for 3 consecutive years. Rose has been a guest on CNBC and is quoted in several best-selling business books and is the author herself of The Chocolate Conversation: Lead Bittersweet Change and Transform Your Business. So welcome, Rose. Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you for having me.
You're welcome. So it's an interesting thing, the serendipity of how we met. We met through your co-founder, your business partner, Gavin McMahon, via Twitter way back in 2011. And I remember the first time that I met you was about a 30-second meeting. And but it was enough for me to tell that you had a power in you or a light in you that made you different than other leaders that I knew. And one of my great privileges since that time, over the past 5 years, is I've gotten to know you as a friend, and I'm always impressed by the way that both your heart and mind operate. And so when we were making our guest list for Synthesis, we were like, we got to have Rose on as quickly as possible. So because you were sort of the design, like you were part of the inspiration for this existence of this podcast. So thank you.
Thank you.
So we want to dive right in, and we're just coming off of the Veterans Day holiday weekend. And so our first question, we always kind of like to understand a little bit about our guests' childhood and background. And we know that you were the daughter of a Marine, the child of a Marine. So tell us a little bit about that experience in growing up.
So I always loved telling about that experience because I loved and adored my dad, who passed away about 5 years ago, and had an amazing influence on my life. I think the thing I learned from Dad was discipline, sense of showing up. One of the things that he often said is it's not that one person's greater than another, it's that one person is more willing than another to put themselves forward and show up. Time was huge for him. So he used to say to me, if you borrow money, you can pay it back. If you show up late, you've taken someone's time and you can't get that back. So I was always 5 minutes early for everything, and I'm very concerned about being on time. In my book, I speak a little bit about resilience, a little story that I often tell about Dad, and I won't get into the whole thing, but I was walking down the street one day with a group of friends, and I met Funicello, who in my age and day was an actress, a child actress, and she was discovered in my little town by Disney, and we were all very jealous, and I took home with a very bad attitude. And my dad straightened me out with a lovely little story about, dandelions, and dandelions being very resilient. And even though he named me Rose, roses are fragile. In my heart, I needed to be a dandelion. So that lasted a very long time because he told me you need to be rooted and grounded in things more important than being jealous of who's prettier, who's doing something better than you are. Just be your best self and the best you can be. So I think I've kind of carried that through my life, and I'm thankful that I don't now feel very jealous if I see someone that's maybe doing something better than I am or whatever. may have a little envy from time to time.
Sure.
But growing up with someone like that, who was both a Marine and a philosopher, and managed to speak all the Romance languages, taught me the balance between life as art and life as discipline.
Beautiful.
Amazing. That idea of life as art and discipline.
Mm-hmm.
So, what was your first real job?
So this is a very cute story. I am not terribly athletic. In fact, I'm pretty awful. But I could sing and dance.
Maybe that's why we're friends.
I had two brothers who were extraordinary athletes, and I used to think that gene just kind of passed me. So we lived across the street from a golf course, and in the winter it would snow very heavily, and my brothers would go off and ski, and my younger brother could ski with no hands. So I get sent out all wrapped up in these incredibly thick snowsuits, and literally nowhere to go and nothing to do. So I noticed everyone was very cold, and I came home one day and I said, Dad, could I just like to sell hot chocolate? I'd be so happy if I could do something. So my father took my little red wagon and put these little sled things on them, the runners, and built me up this little thermos, this large thermos, and these paper cups and a whole bit, and off I went to this little golf course, and I had a thriving business, really going. I came home my first week with $28.72. Now we're dealing in the 60s, so that was a lot of money.
Mm-hmm.
And my dad made this little ledger about all the money that I owed. And I thought, it's possible that I owe all this money, and he gave me back like $6.20. I said, well, what happened to my $20? And he said, well, we had to buy the hot chocolate, we had to buy the cups. Inventory, my dear, inventory. And I fast became aware of profit and loss. Later in the season, it was my second season on the golf course. I think I was 11, second season. And they opened up the little clubhouse and heated it and started selling hot dogs, hot chocolate, and I was absolutely furious because the big guys were going to put me out of business. So I came home and I started screaming and ranting. I threw myself on the floor, and my father basically said, so there's no time for this. Get up, and what's going on? So I told him, and he said, well, you're going to have to think creatively. So my younger brother, who could see with no holes, basically said, well, why don't you give me your money, though? And I'll ski down with the hot chocolates, and this way they don't have to come all the way up to the clubhouse to get them. I'll hand them to people, and then you will still make it. And I thought, okay. And he goes, but you'll have to split your monies with me. So I had to pay him. Anyway, that happened, and the big guys acquired us shortly thereafter. Decided that since we were providing a stall to person service, that they would do the store front, not me. And I got a client. So that was my first job, my first real job. It happened when I was 10 to 11 years old.
That's awesome.
I ran that business for about 3 years. I ended up on the Sears catalog at Christmas while I was in high school. And it was my freshman year of high school. I got my working papers, and I worked in the Sears catalog, and I began to realize that women came to the catalog to buy things. And they were always buying their husband's shirts and all this nonsense. And I basically said, well, you need to buy them tools, craftsman tools. And they said, but they have a lot of tools because they like tools. So I became the #1 booker at the Sears catalog. And I learned a lot from the experience of just interacting with people and selling. Those were early jobs in my career. And I pretty much have worked since I'm probably 11. Some form or another.
I get that.
And always kind of entrepreneurial.
Yeah. It's an interesting thing back then, and it was part of my experience too, growing up on a ranch, where there were opportunities to do entrepreneurial things, and now you see this shift where it's yet still, you know, lemonade stands. I went for a hike a couple weekends ago, and there was still a lemonade stand, and there's still babysitting and lawn mowing, but now young people can start side gigs. They can learn how to write code. My son Caden is 19 and a full-time artist. What's that?
A wonderful one.
Yeah, thank you. But I think it's interesting is if you have an entrepreneurial mind, like you probably were born with, and then it was reinforced by your parents, that there's always opportunities to create a little value and freedom in the world.
Yes. And I think for me, probably the greatest turning point was when I became what I consider to be a corporate brat. I joined a very large corporation, and it was really a square peg in a round hole. And every time I brought my entrepreneurial spirit to that environment, it was usually a very big lift to make it happen. Mm-hmm. And very interestingly, my very first job was with Xerox Corporation after I had gotten out of, I was on the training program at Saks Fifth Avenue, which was still very entrepreneurial. You were allowed to do your thing. Became a buyer. Went into the cosmetic business, started Mary Quant in this country, was the national sales manager for Mary Quant out of London, and built a $10 million business with this gentleman. And I got married, and I realized all this travel was not going to work. So I was offered to be one of two women who joined Xerox in the management ranks because they had not brought women in yet. Mm. And my first year in the job, Sears had decided to move out of New York, and they were one of my big accounts, and moved to Chicago completely. And so they were doing a transfer of equipment. And the guy in Chicago, very smartly and very manipulatively, canceled all the equipment in New York and reordered all the new equipment in Chicago, so I would get hit with the cancellation, and he would have the. And I realized that was kind of not right. So I did a little investigating, and I made a plan to fly out to Chicago to work it out with him. And I got nailed by my district manager who said, "You can't just decide to fly off to Chicago." And that was when I began to realize that big corporate businesses weren't interested in necessarily solving problems as much as they were following a particular protocol. Mm-hmm. And I was stunned by it. And I had to learn, and I spent 23 years at Xerox learning how to work the system in a way that worked for me and would work for the company, and give people the freedom that they needed. Today they call it empowerment. We didn't have the word then, but there was no real autonomy. And without autonomy, people will never bring their best selves to work. And so that for me has been an ongoing truth, if you will, that has lived with me through all my careers, to give people the autonomy that they need to do the job you hire them to do. And it doesn't matter about level and scope and where you sit in the pecking order. What's really important is what you got to get done. And so 23 years of living that corporate life, and now my entire company is dedicated to working in very large corporations, because I know the long way home, and bringing back that entrepreneurial spirit to corporations that are suffering under their own weight. And it's been very interesting to be in it, but not of it anymore. And I'm very grateful for that.
So when you're at Xerox, you're realizing, right, that there isn't this freedom, that people kind of stay penned in. But eventually, you stepped into this role of the Chief Transformation Officer. So how did that come about? Like, at what point was that valued or recognized?
Yeah, and I don't even know if initially it was valued and recognized. A very dear friend of mine who knew how to play by the rules, Ann Mulcahy, who later became the CEO of Xerox, she was truly a good corporate citizen, understood and loved being in a corporate environment. Which was the antithesis of where I was coming from. But we had this lovely friendship. And she became the head of HR, believe it or not, out of the business. And I remember going to her and saying, "Oh my God, HR, how did you do that?" And because we all had this feeling about human resources at the time that it was not a business career. That's changed dramatically, and Anne was one of the change agents. But she called me up and said, "We've got a lot to do differently as we approach the year 2000, I need you to come in and help me transform the way people work.
Mm.
And I thought that sounded very sort of esoteric at the time. I was running a P&L. I wasn't thrilled about the idea. I kind of kept kicking and screaming. The word transformation was not in vogue. I ended up running into the chief engineer, who said to me, "What does it mean to be a chief transformation officer?" And I said, "I guess if you don't change, you're under arrest." But I learned. And that became the genesis of my career that I'm in today, the genesis of this business. And I'm deeply grateful to Ann Mulcahy for having given me the opportunity. She said, "You're one of the few people, Rose, that has the courage to break through the system." That's why I'm bringing you in. And I think that's what happened.
Interesting.
So that gave me an opportunity to have more freedom.
Yeah. But it took,
I went along.
did you feel courageous? I mean, she pointed to that. Did it feel like you were breaking
I didn't know what I would need to be courageous about at the time. But I was never one to step away from something that was challenging. I knew I always liked to do things that were difficult. But I love people, so I can do that with a good deal of collaboration and finesse, so to speak. And Anne always felt that, that I knew how to touch people in a way that I wouldn't come across disruptive. So I think she felt comfortable. And it was a bumpy ride. I mean, it was a bumpy ride. We were involved with Palo Alto Research at the time. The chief scientist was one of our sponsors, John Seeley Brown. He had a very different view of the world and felt very much like I did about breaking through. I met Susan Anderson, who is our anthropologist today, who's working over there in Prague. I was working for the chief knowledge officer, who sponsored the group, and Anne. And then Anne later became the chief operating officer, from going from HR to chief of staff to chief operating officer. And, I was able to follow her career in a way that allowed me to do the things that I wanted to do under her her rubric. It was really quite nice because she was a woman trying to make her way, and she was very good with other women. Started a women's group at Xerox and helped me tremendously.
That's amazing, because I think sometimes, there's, especially during that time, there could be that rivalry or competition, but it doesn't sound like at all what
we had a lot of that too. But I kind of just allowed myself to be androgynous. It's never been in any woman's best interest to make that the topic of conversation or what you come in with. I used to say, come in with your brain, come in with your energy, and if somebody's out there acting macho or out of sorts, ignore it and act as if. And very often it worked.
So what was the moment or the idea that when you wanted to step outside, when you had what kind of made you decide to start your own consulting firm, to step away from corporate life and do this different thing?
So it was a scary time in my life, but I was very unhappy. I was working in Xerox. We had hired a CEO from IBM, and he was failing miserably. And the company was really going through a very difficult time. Our top executives had engaged in something that was unethical, and it was all written up in Forbes magazine at the time, so it's in the public domain. I've written about it in my book. The SEC came in, and they were fined quite a bit of money, and they had done things to manipulate the market. And people had lost their options, their stock options, their life savings, to be quite frank. And I watched the entire company, what I consider to be a horrible existence under the weight of this particular faux pas.
Mm-hmm.
Anne was appointed CEO at that time, and in return for that appointment, he was asked to waive the fines that the SEC putting on these executives, to include our CEO, not the new one, the previous one. And I was disappointed, to be honest, that that took place, and I felt that why should they be relieved of all these millions of dollars worth of fines when there were a whole group of people that had lost all their, their worth in these
Mm-hmm.
So it was at that point in time that I made a decision that I was going to leave Xerox because principally I no longer felt I could be there.
Mm-hmm.
And at that point, I was nervous about becoming an entrepreneur, so I got an offer from Gartner to come in, and I felt maybe that would be a good interim step for me to go to Gartner and be a small fish in a very, big fish in a small pond, and then be able to sort of practice the idea of being in consulting. And I got to do that for a year, and that's where I met Gavin.
Mm.
And after a year, our CEO at Gartner had signed a convertible note without a floor, and they came calling. And the company was in a terrible, chaotic world. He was let go. Bill McDermott, who I had joined Gartner with, who had previously been at Xerox, went west. He is now the CEO of SAP, but at the time he went with Tommy Siebel. And I decided that I needed to do something different. So I did one last thing, and I share this because I think it's an important point.
Mm.
I knew deep down in my soul that it was time for me to go out on my own. But the fear of striking out 100% without having a safety net scared me.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that is true for so many of us. And I just wanted to hang on to this security of knowing that I was working for a company.
Mm-hmm.
All the signs were telling me not to do it, to go out on my own. And I ended up calling an old friend who had been at Xerox, who was with one of the larger consulting firms, and asked if I could come and see him. And he was very happy to see me, and I came in and I told him what I'd been doing, and I was sort of vying for a position. And he took me out to lunch, and he said, I like the way you think. I always have. I like what you're doing. I like your methods that you brought into Gartner. Why don't you call me on Monday, and let's set you up and have you interview with people around here and see what we can do about setting you up with us. And I remember having this feeling of being slightly sad. I didn't feel as elated as I thought I would be.
Mm-hmm.
I came out of the restaurant. I was disoriented. Now, I've lived in New York my whole life, but I'm looking around trying to figure out which way to go to the train. I came out the wrong door. And I finally got my bearings. And he was coming out of the restaurant. He said, Rose, do you know where you're going? And it hit me in that moment. I said, I think I do. And he said, is everything okay? And I said, yes. Thank you for lunch. And I started walking down the street, and I heard that still small voice say, it's not about calling on Monday. It's I want to come into your firm. We need to go do this. And I got on the train, and I went home, and I told my husband, and I called him Monday morning, and I thanked him very much. I said, I think I have to chill down. And it was frightening. It was frightening. But I picked up the phone, I called Gavin, had a conversation with him about us doing this, probably not dissimilar to you and Emily.
Yes.
But, and we, 16 years ago, in July, put up the little sign and started our website. The two of us were in a post office starting the business.
That's so wonderful. I think that's really great to hear, Rose, that just that fear and that that's so real. And I think a lot of entrepreneurs, especially in today's environment, I think it's like so exciting and you're just like thrilled to do it. But it's a lot of it, I don't know, for me, myself, it's a lot of overcoming fear and almost on a daily basis when you're starting out too.
It's terrible. I mean, you go through a lot, and I wrote about it in the book, but
yes.
I had a son going to a very expensive school, and my husband was nearing retirement age, and my income was needed. So it was very, very, very nerve-wracking. But I wouldn't change a thing.
Yeah. It takes a certain amount of, well, courage by itself is required to listen to that voice. And I think when people wonder why their lives don't unfold the way they want them to, in the sense of happiness and fulfillment and meaning, is that they have either don't know that voice is there, or they've heard the voice and then, but they're afraid of it, so they don't listen to it. And it's almost like the first act of courage to be an entrepreneur or to be a leader is to listen to that voice that says, here's what you need to do, even if it feels scary or uncomfortable or uncertain. There's some sort of cosmic rhythm to taking that step forward.
Yeah, it's a spiritual walk as much as it is, right, a mental and emotional one. I feel sometimes for people that don't relate to a power greater than themselves, because I think that is a very lonely place to be. And for me, it's not about organized religion, and it's not about what denomination they're involved in. Well, that is all good. But it's really about that connection we have with a consciousness you know is walking with you daily. And I trust that. And for me, it's been a great source of peace, and a very important part of my walk and my journey, to know that I am being guided and that I can tap into that source of power for assistance and move through what I consider to be a lot of uncertainty.
That kind of gets to another question that we have. You are an expert in transformation and in change, and in changing conversations and in changing organizations. So if you could wave a magic wand and change one conversation that's being had very, very regularly at the corporate level in corporate America right now, what would that be?
Yeah. I think it would be the conversation that every corporation continues to have about EBITDA. Earnings before interest, tax, depreciation. I think that shareholder conversation has trumped humanity, has trumped the opportunity to grow, the ability to be relevant. I think it trumps the expansion of a business. And it happens that it's a necessary part of your business, but when it both becomes the driver and the outcome, it just absolutely breaks things down. And I don't think any corporation understands that. I think that conversation has gotten so big and so massively important. It's on the news. It's everywhere you go. It stops corporations from taking the risks they need to take, from being innovative, from breaking out from old business models that are out of gas. So if I could wave a magic wand, it would be to stop talking about the outcome. Start talking about what you need to do to drive that outcome. And I think focusing on the result and not on what's going to get you the result is just killed them. That would be if I had to tell you the conversation I would change, because it's become so mechanical. It drives every decision, every conversation, and it allows people to hide behind something that's not real. I mean, we made it up.
Right.
It's a stock price thing. It's a false way of evaluating our worth and our value in this country.
Right.
And we've made it up.
Yeah.
And companies that did phenomenally in my day, when it was only an indicator. This is before, I predate, what I would consider to be the modern day stock market. And it was an indicator. It wasn't the be all and end all. Now it's the only measure anybody's ever concerned about. So private companies don't have that, but those private companies that don't have that have the freedom to do things that the public companies don't have until they want to go public, and then they get completely and totally out of control. And that conversation you've worked with it, you guys have been involved in it. When a company is going public, they do a natural act.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, I
Yeah.
apologize for the long-winded answer, but yeah.
No, that's great. No, that's great. We really think that leaders sometimes get stuck in these little creases, and not little, but large creases between old and new. And that's sort of what you're talking about here. I mean, since this conversation is so prevalent and they're stuck in this new and old reality. So what do you see leaders?
Reality. I mean, we would be foolish to say it isn't. But I think if you're focused on the things that would change that reality,
Yeah, that's what
it would be amazing.
Yeah.
But by focusing on that all the time, it just shrinks.
So what should a leader who wants to drive transformation, what should they focus on instead?
Yeah, focusing on what's going to make us relevant, contemporary. How do we get our people passionate around that? Humanity. You know, at the end of the day, people never remember what you did. They remember how you made them feel. We've heard that so many times, but it's so true. The people who have had the greatest impact, the against all odds kind of coaches, bosses, look at Alan O'Malley walking the board and completely turning that thing around. What makes people able to do that? They are relevant. What made Stephen Jobs come out of losing a company, ending up accidentally back in it, and turning it all around? And he wasn't the nicest guy in the world. He had passion, and he knew how to motivate people, and he knew how to change the conversation. So I do think that those things are critical, and that would be the goal I would give every CEO, is to step back. What are you about? What do you want?
Yeah.
What do you want to bring to this company? What legacy do you want to leave? What is it that you think your company can do that no other company can do? And then how do you harness that and get your people rallied around it?
Right.
At the end of the day, that's it.
Yeah. We have noticed that if a leader is detached from his or her own humanity, you know, where they don't really give a sense of who they are and where they're going, to your point, Rose, it's virtually impossible for them to be attached to the other humans around them, whether that's employees or customers. And that's why one of the things that we believe is that when, you know, we know that low EQ, low emotional intelligence, will kill a career, but it's entirely a choice based off of investing in your own being as a human. And what we love about the work that you do, the work that we do, is we're really reintroducing people to themselves, so they can really see the people around them that they're leading or selling to.
Yeah. And the thing that's so true about that, Justin, is that I often ask people, would someone at home recognize you at work?
Yeah, good. That's a great question.
Who it is.
Yeah.
You are who you are when you're home. I mean, and you might be a little more formal than the next person, or guarded, or introverted, or whatever, but you are who you are.
Yeah.
I think, you know, would someone at work recognize you at home? And if the answer to those two questions are no, then there's something going on here. You've got to be authentic, you know, who you are. And I always say leadership is messy. Transformation is messy. You know, I was watching Patton. I watch it every once in a while. I like to watch George C. Scott in Patton. And I learn something new every time I watch it. But, you know, at one point, Omar Bradley says to him, George, I do what I'm trained to do. You do what you love to do. Now, that was good and bad, because he was more to the glory of being this great warrior. But he saw himself bigger than life, and his people then saw themselves as bigger than life.
Right.
And I think that, you know, he was messy. He got relieved of command twice, and ended up, you know, in the end, not doing so well because he opened up his mouth too many times. But leadership is messy. And if you want to play this straight, sort of by the numbers profile, rather than who you really are, it's never, ever going to be a breakthrough.
Yeah.
So I don't think leaders who have to lead people through a transformation and aren't willing to get dirty a little and maybe show some vulnerability and maybe make a few mistakes are ever going to make it. It's messy.
Yeah. So the definition of synthesis that we like to use is a combination of diverse concepts that combine and create like a higher stage of truth. And so what's one truth, and maybe it's messy itself, but what's one truth that you've learned in your life or in your career that still guides you today?
Yeah. So there's probably a couple of them, but the one that stands out for me is it's not who's right, it's what's right.
Hmm.
So, and that always gets me because sometimes I want to be right.
Yeah.
The worst possible way. And I kind of know I am, and I want to force it. And so I step back and I think, it's not who's right, it's what's right. And I equate it back to something that I wrote about in the book. I tried for a long time to have a child. And when I couldn't, I adopted Zach. And I brought him to work one day when he was very, very little. It was when I first could bring him out. Everybody wanted to meet him and see him. So there were a group of managers around that came over. And this woman, who had been difficult, had walked over to me and said, is that your new adopted child? And I thought, I wasn't thrilled with that particular remark.
Mm-hmm.
And so I said, this is Zach, this is my son. And she said, well, there's nothing like having your own.
Oh my goodness.
I had a choice, and I heard my dad's voice. Take the high road, never go down to someone's level, and I can't tell you that I always survive. Most of the time, I trip over myself, and I'm a verbal acrobat, so I can easily come back. But I stopped for a moment because it was so poignant to me, and it was such a happy moment. And I looked at her, and I thought, I need to reframe this conversation. It's not who's right, it's what's right. And I said to her, when my younger brother had the first grandchild, first niece, I held my niece, and I thought I had never felt anything more exhilarating. It was just this wonderful feeling. Jess is going through it right now with his family. And I said, but when I picked up Zach and realized this was my very own child, you're right, there's nothing like having your own. And she quietly went back to her office, and the group kind of exhaled, and it just gave everybody a pass. And it was the one time that I can remember doing something where I lived up to that model of it's not who's right, it's what's right.
Mm-hmm.
And it just changed. It changed the way I want to have conversations.
Mm-hmm.
And I can't always say that I do that well, but in that one I did.
Thank you. That's great. Yeah. Well, this has been a wonderful time together. So thank you so much for sharing
Thank you.
a little bit of your journey and your, so much of your wisdom with us. And we're so grateful to have you as part of our tribe.
We are too. And we appreciate having you guys part of our tribe. Okay.
Thank you very much.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.